pjnet.tv. Good evening, and we have not one but two first-time guests in queue for you this wonderful Thursday evening. Our first guest is standing by in our green room. Let's count it down to Studio 8, starting now. All right, good evening. Welcome to pjnet.tv. I'm Coach Prasick, and I want everybody to relax. I know that we're a little bit late getting started, but I want to thank our next guest who has graciously allowed some extra time so that we could meet our guest who is coming to us all the way from the Republic of Texas. And Ben Compton is standing by. Ben, glad you're here. Today is your 20th anniversary of sorts.
Yeah, today marks 20 years walking with the Lord, which is a pretty big deal for some of us. So.
Well, you don't look that old. Okay. And before that, what was your life like spiritually?
So, like a lot of people, I grew up going to church, and the short version is I heard one thing on Sunday, saw another lived out during the week. But by age 19 or so, if you would have asked me if I believed in Jesus, believed that he died on the cross for my sins, I would have probably said yeah, but you wouldn't really had any reason to ask me that question. Because I looked nothing like a Christ follower. And I moved to Texas, and by the age of 22, I'd abandoned all thoughts of Christianity or God, period, and was an agnostic.
You grew up in church, so intellectually, in your head, you had the information.
I had the information. Yeah,
Okay.
That wasn't the problem.
And many, it's understandable, I guess, to find irreconcilable the things that you're taught on. The dogma one day doesn't line up with the practice during the week.
Right.
Not sure that your response to that was exactly trying to reconcile them, but nonetheless, that was your coping mechanism. But
Yeah.
I'm curious. That's a complete turnaround. Did you just wake up one day and say, "I've got it wrong"?
No, not even close. So my journey to Jesus started when, at least on my timeline, okay, that I'm aware of. God's timeline may be different, but my journey to Jesus took place. It began on June 11th of 2001, and I arrived at the cross, so to speak, on June 28th of 2002. And so there was a year and a month journey of God showing up in my life in strange ways that I could own. The fact that God existed had become undeniable to me.
Okay.
And I had a heart to want to know who this God was. And of course that kind of culminated at the cross a year and a month after my initial encounter with God.
Well, that's interesting, Ben. And given our talk earlier today during the pre-production chat,
Right.
you're a smart guy, and a lot of times when people make a turnaround such as yours, there's usually a couple of things. One of two things. There's been some intervening trauma in their life
Right.
or there was an intervening person or
Right.
persons. Was either of those the case with you?
Along the way, yes, but I had what I can only say was an initial encounter with God before any of those other things. And I mean, I can tell you a quick story about what that looked like if that's, if
Well,
that's anything
if you're not
you think
comfortable
folks are
sharing it, you
interested
don't have to. But I mean, you sound almost like a Damascus road experience.
in a sense, yeah. Just real quickly. I mean, a lot of your viewers probably know C.S. Lewis,
Yeah,
and maybe even some have read his autobiography. But Lewis writes about his conversion as kind of a two-stage conversion too. Eventually, from atheism to theism, to belief in a God, and then sometime later, actually believing that Jesus Christ was the Son of
hmm
God.
Okay.
So that's so Lewis's two-stage conversion was probably a lot more intellectual than mine. But so stage one was June 11th of 2001. And I had a good friend who I hadn't seen in a few months because he'd been in a mental facility for a while. He had a lot of bad things that had happened to him when he was growing up, had never reconciled them, and he was self-medicating with illegal drugs. Um, but so he got out of the mental facility, and we went and had dinner, and we were outside of the Bennigans where we worked, and he is trying to light up his cigarette, and there's a breeze blowing. We're outside now, and while my friend is trying to fumble for his cigarette, all I can tell you is that I had in like that inside me the the undeniable knowledge that God, one, existed, and two, was near. Okay, like, and so much so that it shook me up. And inside my head, I said, God, if you're real, tell me what I did wrong and tell me what I need to do.
Hmm.
And that night started a year and a month long journey that eventually
hmm
brought me to Jesus. But after that night, like some, one, he was the fact that God, right? And I wasn't ready for the Christian God. Okay,
hmm
so some kind of creator God, maybe even possible the universe, right? Because that's where I was, right? But something shifted, but after that night, God became undeniable, and I wanted to know who he was, and I had a passion to know who he was, and that was not anything that I had ever experienced before in my entire life.
Was this 13-month period a time of worldview study for you? Because you're a very learned guy, Ben.
Yeah, so that's my degree, and right, so my degree is Christian apologetics. I have a master's from HBU, and I love that stuff. But as far as my actual coming to Jesus story, I would love to tell you, yes, I studied the arguments, and yes, I arrived. The only conclusion was Jesus. That's not how it happened. Just after that night, I knew I'd had an encounter with God again. Not even close to saying, "Oh yeah, this is the Bible God." Okay, not even close. But having a desire to know Him,
Right.
whatever that took.
But nihilism and existentialism were pretty much out the window at that point. So
Oh
you,
yeah, 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 yeah. So I was honestly at that stage of my life, I was an agnostic because it's I think it's utterly silly. Even then, I thought it was a kind of a fool's statement to just say I'm an atheist.
mhm.
Like to just say you can know, or you're so convinced that you don't believe God exists that you just no, I'm good. So, but I was a happy agnostic, happy to say maybe God exists, maybe God doesn't. Who can know, right? In the
Mhm.
meantime, I will live as I want. But
Right.
and at that time, I was far more influenced by Oprah Winfrey than than say Nietzsche or any of the existentialist philosophers.
I hope many hear what you just said.
Like
I
I
really
can
do. because the danger with the gospel according to Oprah and others like her, I'm not
Right.
singling her out,
Not only, right.
is
Yeah.
that it sounds good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It does sound good, and that is extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And we as Christians need to be very cautious about sounding good versus being truthful.
Absolutely.
The truth is good news, actually. Well,
Absolutely.
Ben, I'm glad you made that journey, and I find it just I don't want to say comical, but just amazing
It's
that
pretty funny.
your friend is struggling to light a cigarette, and you somehow see God in that.
Well,
That's
I won't say that I saw God in that. I will. For me, it was as undeniable a showing up. And right, I'm using metaphors here, but when Moses and I'm not. I know Moses likely believed at that point anyway,
mhm,
but it was as undeniable for me as Moses' encounter with Yahweh at the burning
at the
bush
burning bush.
was. Like it was
Amazing. Yeah.
that 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 powerful.
God can can speak to us in so many ways, and I would love to spend the next half hour talking apologetics. I really would, but we did that earlier.
That's
And
fine. We
it,
can do it whatever you like.
it would well the journey. So that was 20 years ago
Awesome.
that you came full circle from your upbringing to your waywardness to arriving at the foot of the cross, and that's just it's great that you remember it because that just underscores how significant an event in our lives accepting Jesus Christ actually is. It should be.
Absolutely.
So I don't know the exact date. I do remember the circumstances,
Yeah.
but I was like in the third grade. There's been a lot of events since then. Anyway,
Yeah, I would think so.
yeah, a lot of them. Okay, so you accept Christ, you go about your merry way. I believe you professionally you did your teaching thing.
So, let's see. So, you mean most recently?
Well, your profession, up to the point we're going to get to your book because
Okay.
you
Oh yeah.
literally you
Yeah.
have an interesting story. You intentionally put the brakes on a decent career to write a book. That and I want to hear about that. But what was that decent career?
Well, I was teaching ESL online with a company called VIP Kid, and I don't know if I would call it the world's most amazing career. I mean, but it looked okay on a resume. But my wife and I had prayed, and I was just it required a lot of early mornings, and it was just kind
Mm,
of
yeah,
wrecking, like very short sleep, wrecking me emotionally, and you know prayed up, napped up, but still not where I wanted to be as far as feeling emotionally resilient and walking closely with the Lord. And frankly, I was just really cranky a lot. And I wasn't getting as much time to write as I wanted. That's the other thing. And so my wife and I prayed about it, talked about it, and some things came up in October, and we both agreed it was time to take at least 6 months to a year off to just really focus on the writing.
well, and that also gives you a time to sort of reprioritize other matters, and teaching ESL, English as a second language, a lot of times does involve some peculiar hours
Yeah,
because your students might be on the other side of the world, and
yeah, it's a
you know
13-hour time difference. So
since they are the ones paying, you kind of
you adapt. Yes, yeah,
they're the profit, you're the overhead, so you adjust to
yeah.
them rather than at least that's the way it's supposed to work. Okay, so you take this sabbatical of sorts and your wife was in agreement.
Absolutely.
Then you took off to a Christian writers conference, I believe.
Yeah, and so well, and let's yes, yeah. So let's backpedal a little bit. Some of your readers, or sorry, some of your viewers are probably know Diane Mills.
Hmm.
Diane writes lots of mystery, suspense, Christian fiction. Before I even went to the conference, So Diane Mills is my writing mentor, and we had talked, and she wanted to make sure I went to the conference. I went to the 21 conference. It was great. I'd actually won the Flash Fiction Award the year before during COVID,
How about that?
but because
Yeah.
all the COVID wackiness, I got to watch my award on live stream. Um, yeah, but it was still cool
Yeah.
because I'd never won an award or anything like that before.
Yeah.
So I went to the 21 conference, and I went to last year's conference,
Are you
and
talking about Blue Ridge?
Blue Ridge, yes, sir,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And phenomenal conference if you have any writers or considering writing folks in the mix. Um, can really help you determine if going forward on a pursuit of some kind of career in writing is a good next step. But yeah, so up until this year, Diane had been working with me on a space opera, right? If you don't know that term, just think Star Wars. And and so I was working on a space opera that a Christian space opera, think Star Wars in a theistic universe. But I'm also, and here's the other thing, right? You mentioned that I'm into apologetics. I'm a big apologetics nerd, discipleship nerd. I'm the discipleship and apologetics pastor at my church. So as much as my heart is writing and weird stories, my heart is
Mm-hmm.
also discipleship, evangelism, theology. Um, and the Lord had been sharing some things with me, since 2015 about worldview and the Christian life and what I would have called the abundant life, and I still do, but now are points that really have a lot to do with mental health. And about a month or two before the conference this year, the Lord had told, I don't say the Lord audibly spoke to me, but providence, scripture, circumstances, it really seemed like the Lord was saying it's time to push this book on prayer and worldview to the fore.
Hmm.
And so that's what I did. And I got to talk to Steve Lobby, who is a bigwig literary agent. I got to talk to a lot of literary agents and folks at the conference, and they said, one, what you've got is unique in the best possible way. Unique is not always good in the realm of writing. Okay, there's a reason things are unique because, well, maybe they're too weird, or like they're so unique nobody's going to be interested. But they said what you've got is unique in the best possible way. And it's what's needed right now as far as from the mental health aspect of things, because we're kind of out of COVID, we're out of the pandemic and into the endemic, but yet even in the church, people are suffering from depression and anxiety, and that's it's always been there. That's part of human existence, even for believers. Paul said he is sorrowful yet always rejoicing. Paul said he was even anxious, right, for the churches, right? So just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you're always happy all the time. But we've got such a degree in the culture at large, but also in the church, of mental health issues. This is really a time and place to address some of those things. And my specific slant is the renewing of the mind, and Christians really deep down in the depths of their mind believing and banking on and being transformed according to what God has told us he is after and he is doing in our lives. Because if we don't know that, we're just going to think he's mean or bad things are happening, and we don't know why.
Right. The line between intellect, mind, and spirit is kind of blurry, but it really encompasses all of those are a part of the Christian experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Paul talks about we seeing with the eyes of the heart, and talks about the spirit of your mind. right? Or so your spirit has a mind, right? And so, and if we go back to the Hebrew culture, right, which is where we should be coming from ultimately, in the Hebrew understanding, the heart, right, not only was the center of emotions, but also thought. And so they didn't split things up like later Greek thought do and like we do so much today.
Mhm.
There's not a whole lot, right? For the Hebrew, in the Hebrew mind, the heart encompasses intellect, emotions, will, all of it. It is one ball of wax.
It's the essence of our humanity.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, it's what makes us human. And we had a discussion about lower animals earlier. We won't go
Yeah.
there tonight. We don't, or any other night probably. Anyway, um, you think of yourself as an out of box thinker. Is that just because you're unique, or is that good?
I, I well, I'd say I hope so, but I do think that's good. Yeah, because so boxes by definition are constricting.
Hmm.
Okay, and you can be protected from other things, thinking of about living within a box, right? Whether it's a so let's use some metaphors, right? Whether it's the glass box of fear, or whether you are literally just keep yourself locked away in some specific paradigm of thinking. Boxes are constricting. Now, I'm not saying God, so right, God's word is our ultimate framework and reference point.
Hmm.
But even at that, let's just be honest. We can go to church all of our lives and hear one thing about God, and yet we look in the scriptures and we see maybe what I was hearing on Sunday mornings is wrong. And so it's kind of a side trail as believers. So God is always stepping outside of the boxes we like to put him in.
Hmm.
And practically speaking, to accomplish any of the things we need to accomplish in life, we may need to think outside the box or find friends who can't for us, especially in this culture. It's a strange place. I'm older than I've ever been, and America is a strange place to live in right now. And thinking inside the box is not helpful for us if we want to be people who reach others for Christ.
Well, I could preach a sermon. Boxes, as you mentioned, they can be constrictory, uh, you know, but at the same time, a well disciplined dog can be let out to run in the yard and play.
That's true.
A less disciplined dog has to be tied up or put in a cage. And well, as we approach the end, you've mentioned that you're writing a book, but for a guy that's fascinated with science opera, you were even wearing a Star Wars shirt earlier today when we spoke. Your book doesn't sound like Star Wars. Am I? Sounds a little more on truth side or whatever. What?
Yeah. So again, what I put away was the space opera. That's what I had been working for literally like a year and a half, and the Lord just kind of pushed this book that I'm working on now, and I'd been working kind of back burner on it for like a year and a half, but that's I'm weird. I love Star Wars. I love
I wasn't gonna say.
apologetics. I don't mind saying it. I love Christian worldview, and right now, what the Lord has me working on is helping believers, right, very quickly understand that they have the answers that all mankind is really seeking the answers to, but we don't think about what God is after as far as the grand purpose of our lives, what it means to be to our identity, what it means to belong to God. We don't understand our mission, where our hope is meant to be, our ambition, our purpose, and a lot of it we know here, but it hasn't really sunk deep when the trial comes. And when the trial comes is when that knowledge matters most.
Well, you're a smart guy. I wish we had a little bit more time. Let me wrap it up with this. You're
Certainly.
you're you're a student of worldviews and apologetics and things like that. And I don't know that a lot of Christians are fascinated with either of those two topics. They just study the Bible, and and that's fine. But the world out there, there are many places that Christianity is not known, not recognized, not believed. But one thing I learned in sociology uh, uh, is there's something funny about humans. We mentioned several of them earlier when we were
Indeed.
talking, but something peculiar about human social systems. No society, no social construct, no tribe ever has been discovered that didn't worship something.
Right. Mhm.
There is a need for us, and I think it gets back to answering those. I think you had five fundamental questions.
Yeah.
There's something empty inside of us that that vacuum is just abhorrent. We've got to fill it. But Christianity is a peculiar worldview in that many of the worldviews have a lot of commonality,
Right.
including Christianity.
Right.
But Christianity is very distinct in one way,
Mhm.
in that it is exclusive to all others. You can't be a Christian and a Hindu. You
Correct.
can't, that despite the Gospel of Oprah, Christianity claims and asserts that there is only one, and any other way is therefore wrong way to go to heaven, which other worldviews don't call it heaven. They
Right.
have alternatives to heaven, but it's basically the same thing as what happens after we die.
Yeah.
We're trying to deal with our own mortality.
Big question. Yeah. For a lot of
Ben,
people.
Ben, you're a smart guy. It's great. Not only are you a smart guy, you're a pretty young guy. You're just a puppy. You've got years, hopefully, ahead
I
of
hope.
you to straighten out the mess that we've made. And we hope that through your writings and through your ministry that God helps you do that. But it's been a wonderful time having you share with us, Ben. And your story is amazing. Your willingness and boldness in telling it makes it even better. And we appreciate
Thank
you
you, Mike.
sharing that with us. Well, folks, that was a first time guest. Guess what's coming up in just a moment? In just a moment. Not very long at all. Another first time guest. I can't wait. She'll be coming our way any moment now. I've got to make room for her. While I'm doing that, our producer, Miss Barbara, for our chat room folks, will play a tune or two. And we will have our next guest in just a few minutes. While I'm doing that, can you do this? Can you ask yourself two simple questions and answer yourself very honestly? Here's the first one. What is the boldest thing that you have ever done for Jesus Christ? The second question is, when was that? And the challenge is to not be satisfied with either answer.